So, were you able to look at the PDF I sent?
Yes, yes, I did. That was
Yeah.
great. I actually made a file for it. It's in like, I'm going to kind of keep a cyber catalog of the magazines because I do love your magazine. It's seriously,
Well,
it's
thank
something to
you.
look forward to.
So, a couple things I'm going to tell you that I tell every VIP member that I'm doing a Zoom with. I'm only a few days into this now, so this is kind of
Okay.
new for me too. One is I've written a secret word. It's an everyday word. It's not in the Beach Boys vocabulary. If you ever had the pleasure, like I did, of watching Groucho Marx do "You Bet Your Life," uh,
Uh,
where if somebody said a word during the show, the duck would come down, with the cigar and the black mustache, and they would win they would be holding the word. So if you happen to say the word, you'll get like a historical, very rare, like one or two of a kind collectible. If you happen to, and I will do my best to remember to tell you what the word is when we're done, if you don't say it. The other thing is, we may or may not be visited by a special guest while we're doing our Zoom. So that's the other thing. Now I've managed to do a pretty good job. All 7 of my Zooms so far have had special guests. So
Sounds cool.
I do my best. I'm trying to make this because this will end up on YouTube. Well, what I've been doing is, so we have this one, which is the summer edition, and then we have this one, which was the fall edition, and then
Hmm.
we have the PDF I sent to your care, which was kind of part 3 of these two. And I wanted to kind of just ask you, as a reader and subscriber to the magazine, what you enjoyed about these 2 editions plus the PDF material, and what you learned, and you know.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, as in all of your publications, I love reading about how art is made, and that comes across quite clearly with some of your stuff. I mean, for instance, my wife has read some of the interviews or whatnot because she's seen the Beach Boys so many times only because of me. And her opinion is like, well, some of this stuff is, then they start talking about lyrics and tracks, and being an old musician, that stuff really interests me. And this last interview with Jeff Foskett, I think, was in the last one. That was very interesting because his whole career kind of is very intriguing to me.
Hmm.
And uh, so, and you touch on aspects of this group of people. I have this vision here in Pittsburgh of like this, and I know it probably doesn't exist, but this giant group of a Beach Boy family, like from Fred Vale to Bobby Figueroa to all these people who are, when I hear their names, um, I think of them as part of this Beach Boy family. Like Bobby Figueroa is a friend of mine on Facebook, and he's a friend of mine because I'm a big Dodger fan.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And it's really kind of funny because sometimes I'll chat with him back and forth about the Dodgers, and I'm not even sure he knows that I am also a Beach Boy fan, but um, you realize that he played a major role in the Beach Boys. I mean, more than I think he's even given credit for. And so I get a lot of that vibe from your publication all the time.
No, that's excellent. I appreciate that. Thank you.
May I ask you a question?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You seem like you're younger than me, and you said you started liking the Beach Boys in the '70s. So I'm kind of guessing you're maybe in your 50s.
I'm 58.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Because I'm trying to think of when I first got turned on to the Beach Boys. I was a little kid. My family used to go to Hamilton, Ontario,
Okay.
with family, and the kid up there who was kind of a bully and about 5 years older than me, and I was like maybe 9, had the concert album, and I would listen to that 1964, I think it was, album like over and over and over again. Then I kind of like forgot about the Beach Boys, and then they came to my campus when I was in college in 71, the fall of 71,
Where was that?
up at IUP, Indiana University of
Okay.
Pennsylvania.
Hmm.
And that's, if you look at my collection of music of the Beach Boys, it's Pet Sounds and then Sunflower On. I somehow have amassed an accumulation of music with the Beach Boys and solo that encompasses all the music from that earlier period. But I love to listen to the my wife calls it the drug age, like when they started like being in 72, 73, they were, with the beards, and there was a period of I believe it was a period, you would know this more than I, but it was a period of the Beach Boys weren't very popular back then.
Well,
They had
certainly
lost
not,
some of their,
not right, not in the United States. Well, and it was comparatively speaking. They and every historian who's written about them compares it to the success from the United States perspective only. I'm speaking of the success they had in the early to mid 60s as a United States act, the chart success they had associated with the releases, the album and single releases that they had. And then it was the late 60s going into the early 70s where in the United States they kind of trickled off. But Pet Sounds did better in the UK than it did here. And I don't, and right off the top of my head, I'll get it wrong, but I think Pet Sounds charted quite well here, just not what everybody anticipated.
yeah,
And, and it's held up as well as any fine wine out there. It's turned into this musical over, I don't even know how to, it's just ended up meaning so much to so many people
yeah,
worldwide that I stopped looking or thinking about their work I couldn't even tell you when, but I don't think of their work. It's easy to talk about a well-known song or a well-known album because then more people, if you do a cover for something that is a very recognizable thing that many people know, like if I just put the word Kokomo on the cover, many people would know what that is. Now, maybe not as many people would know what this is, right? They say, "Oh, I see the
right,
group. I noticed the group, but I don't know what that is. What is
right,
that?"
yeah,
So I know what that is. I listened to that album like it was going out of style when it was released. I had a cassette player in my car. I listened to it wherever I went. I just loved it. I just thought it was amazing. I just love Brian's soaring falsetto. I love Carl's songwriting. It didn't matter to me whether or not the song. And now, granted, I worked in radio at the time, so I loved turning on the radio or being in the radio station and playing a song because then it was really cool. But it didn't matter to me if it was on the radio because I had it for myself in my
right,
car. So when I discovered them, and I don't know how your experience was, but when I discovered them, it was through the radio, right? I heard something, and I couldn't tell you what the first song ever was, but I know by the time I had moved from New York to Charlotte, I moved in January of '79. I ended up in in my EYC and my church youth minister, who ended up in the Add Some Music to Your Day music video. That's the guy who taught me into the Beach Boys.
oh my,
Other Paul Martin. I ended up just falling in love with them. It looks like we have a special guest about to join us, and since you're a longtime subscriber, you'll recognize the name. So I know you've subscribed for many years, Dave, and I know you have. I would imagine you have the Audrey Wilson edition and the Carl Wilson 75th birthday edition. Those were,
oh yeah, 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 yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Um, and what else? Uh, and then the Brian Spring 2022, talking about Brian's relationship music. So Dave Dipetro, I would like to introduce you to Jon Parks.
Okay. Hi, John. How are you?
Real good, Dave. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Where are you from?
I'm from Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I live right out about 10 minutes outside of the city.
All right.
We just got done. We just got done talking to one another about the Steelers.
Oh, okay. No,
Everyone
that's
talks to us about the Steelers. Wherever we go, you say, "Where are you from?" You say Pittsburgh. Go, "Oh, you're a big Steeler fan," Goes with
well,
the turf.
I'll tell you a story. I met Terry Bradshaw one time. He was I had a recording studio in Las Vegas that actually the Beach Boys gave me about $1 million worth of equipment to make a studio in Las Vegas. But Mel Tillis and Terry Bradshaw called and they wanted to come in. They wanted to do kind of a preview of some music regarding a car show that they wanted to present to Warner Brothers. So they had part of the film, they had everything going on that, but they didn't really have any music or anything or some singing going along with it. So they came into the studio, and I'll tell you more of the story too, because it's kind of funny. But anyway, I knew Mel Tillis from before. I met Terry Bradshaw. The funny thing for me about Terry Bradshaw is he wasn't that tall, but I shook hands with him, and his hand was about twice as big as mine, and his arms were twice as long as my arms were.
Is that right?
And so anyway, they had a spit tune in my control room.
How long ago was that?
Huh?
How long ago was that? Was that in the 70s?
What happened?
In the early 80s.
Okay. No,
And it happened is we're doing all of this music and everything, and I have a big parking lot outside by my studio, and a big bus pulled up out there, and Terry every once in a while would turn to Mel and say, "What about the lead guitar part? We're going to get the lead guitar part done." And Mel said, I'll go check. And he'd go out to the bus, and Waylon Jennings was in the bus waiting to do his part there. And Mel came back in and said he's been drinking and stuff, and we'll get it done, but we'll find out what'll happen. And they keep working on the music, and pretty soon Mel goes back out, and he gets Waylon Jennings. Waylon Jennings comes back into the control room, and he can barely stand up. He's got one shoulder on the wall, and I put a big stool out in the studio for him, and it took him about 5 minutes to get his act together. And I, pushed record, and he just laid down the best lead guitar part I've ever heard in my life.
Is that right? Wow.
wow.
I bet you got some great stories.
That was my experience with the Steelers.
Well, I can't say I have many experiences. I know back in the 70s we had season tickets, and I when Three Rivers was active, this is I think when the Steelers played the Rams in the 1980 Super Bowl, and they were playing the Houston Oilers at the time here in Pittsburgh, and it was just raining ice, cold, just terrible weather. 1989, I was 30 years old, so I did stupid things like go to the game in that kind of weather. But
yeah, well, you guys do that back there.
yeah, well, with this kid was pushing his buddy in a wheelchair up the ramp at Three Rivers Stadium, and he had a big blanket on him, and just was like, you looked at this picture and you went, wow, what diehard fans these were. And so the kid pushes him up, and as we're getting in the stadium, I go up to the kid and want to congratulate him for being such a dedicated fan. As I walk up to him and he's in the stadium, he stands up out of the wheelchair and he's sitting on 3 cases of beer. And I go, well, that's more a Steeler fan than being pushing his buddy up in a wheelchair. But
yeah,
those were the days.
Hey, I just thought of something else that happened in Pittsburgh with the Steelers. We had done a show in Pittsburgh, and it was after the show, and I was with Steve Love, Mike Love's younger brother. He and I were, he was our business manager at Grillo, and we were walking back to the show. We had done the box office, and I had probably $150,000 in my briefcase, all cash. And we're walking along the back of the hotel, and these two big black guys are walking towards us, and they got to us, and one of them grabbed me and put me up against the wall.
Yeah.
Started
Oh.
saying, "What have you had in the briefcase and everything?" And so, there was nothing I could do. I just sat there and kind of took it all in. And after about 30 seconds, they both started laughing, and they were two of the linemen for the Steelers.
Is that right?
And they picked me up and put me up against the wall, and they're laughing. Then they invited us to their party, so we went to their party in the hotel afterwards.
What venue were you at the time? Do you remember? Because one of the things I've kind of left out of this, I worked in the concert business here in Pittsburgh for 35 years. And so I obviously have seen the Beach Boys many times as a fan, but I've also worked at venues where they've been at. So
Yeah. I think at that time, I think we were doing, sometimes we do smaller venues like theaters,
Mhm.
3,000 people, 5,000 people. And I think it was one of those tours where we were doing theaters, and I don't recall the theater.
Okay. Yeah, of course, the Beach Boys, they played at Three River Stadium once, sold the place out.
Yeah, right. Well, we
And
always did. We toured a lot. I mean, because Brian stayed back at home recording, but I'll look into that a little bit with you too. So Brian would stay home and record, and he used a great rhythm section. What are their names again, Dave? The Wrecking.
the Wrecking
Oh,
Crew.
the Wrecking Crew. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't if you've ever seen their special on TV. It's worth seeing.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, I've seen part of it, not the whole thing.
Yeah. So anyway, Brian would stay back, and the rest of us were touring. Where was I going with that?
We're talking about the Steelers. You're talking about
Pittsburgh.
We would plan a theater tour for inside a city, and then we would do a college tour. We may hit the same towns, or we may hit a couple of 100 miles away from that town. Then we do fairs and then stadiums. Those four things. So we would do the United States, and we might do 3 of those types of shows in one city throughout the year.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, because I seen the Beach Boys. The venue I worked at mostly was it had 2 setups. One was theater and one was a small arena, which was about 6,000. And then we would just drop these curtains down and make it into a theater, which was about 2,800. And that's what we did the Beach Boys mostly.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds familiar. I think it was one of the towns that the halls were union halls. And were you in the union? Were you working in the?
Yeah, oh yeah. In Pittsburgh, we were all union. Yeah, there was no getting around being in the union, having unions in our shows in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. I always appreciated the guys, but what I did, because I had my own crew with me, I'd get there and they'd bring the truck and stuff, and they had one union guy would take stuff off and put it on the floor. Another union guy would take it from there to off stage, and then another guy would take it and put it on stage, and another guy would set it where it's supposed to be. And so I gave them all $100 and told them to go out to dinner, and I'd do it for them, and they appreciated it.
Yeah. That's there was a bunch of brothers who ran the Teamsters in Pittsburgh, and they were in charge of getting it to the end of the truck and getting off the truck. And that's when then they just stopped after that. And then IOTC took over. But
well, I made a mistake. I mean, the union thing, I made a mistake one time in Las Vegas. Cheech and Chong were in Las Vegas, and the way they make movies is they get their own little cameras, and they run around the world and do things. So that's how they write their movies. And Chong had or Cheech had a music group, and they wanted to play too. And he didn't know where he could go play that. So we had where magicians keep all of their stuff. There was a lot of big warehouse space there. We made a room for Cheech set his group up there and play and everything. And then one of my guys one time went to the hotel and picked Cheech up and took him to that venue with his group. And they closed the movie down, the Teamsters did, because one of my guys picked up Cheech and drove him someplace. And so I had to talk to the network, and I apologized, and they understood. They said it's crazy, but that's how it is. But they closed it down for 2 days, and Cheech and Chong didn't care. You know what they do when someone did that to them? They went to Las Vegas, and they both bought a house for their wives in Las Vegas.
There you go.
And said, "Don't close this down again."
Oh my God. Pretty cool. Where are you based out of? Where do you live?
I'm in San Clemente, California.
Oh, okay.
Dennis and I used to come down here and surf a lot. Doheny, which is in the song.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
San Onofre too. San Onofre is about 5 miles from me, and Doheny is about 2 miles. I still surf when I can. I'm getting a little old for not getting up like I could before, but
my cousin owned a Danish pastry shop in Del Mar for many, many years.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I've been out there a couple of times. Actually, my wife and I we went to the CBS thing, David.
Mm-hmm.
The
in Orange.
You mean the Grammy?
The Grammy salute, yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, then that was really real from my perspective. That was very interesting. The production that went into that, the production value was just unbelievable with the bands and swapping stages and bringing Beck out and bringing
Oh, it's a tremendous job, the production. Well, you worked in a facility, so you probably saw a lot of that working in those venues. But big shows like that, like when we did the UNICEF show in Paris that one time, where we met the Beatles and Maharishi and everybody there. I mean, I think it was a very long show. It took a week. It was about 300 different artists on it. From America was Johnny Cash and the Beach Boys, and then Marlon Brando did some stuff, and Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton were the hosts of the show.
Wow.
But you can imagine the turnover of acts.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things that really struck me was the drum kits. The bands would come out and they had a backup band that played the basic Beach Boy tunes, but then some of the bands would come out, and have their own equipment. They'd roll it out, and it just brought back memories of when we would do shows, and if there was like 2 or 3 drum kits, it was like a big deal. But these people at the Dolby Theater had so much staff, and it just made me kind of jealous of like going, wow, look at that. I mean, they had staff on stagehands that were out of this world. Unbelievable the way they ran that show. I was just very, very impressed.
Yeah. I mean, we did one show at the Crystal Palace. It was outdoors, and I forget, there were 5 or 6 different artists on the show. I forget who some of them were.
What year would that have been, John? Roughly.
Boy.
Because I might be able to pull that up for you.
It was late. It must have been in 73 or 4 or something like that.
Okay.
And European tour. Maybe 72.
Trying to find it here.
But I mean, what happened at that show was an outdoor show, and they had the Crystal Palace. It was like an amphitheater, and they had a pond in front of it, and the audience was 300 feet away from the pond. on the other side of the pond. And
Hmm.
so we used everybody shared equipment that day. But the problem with drummers is they set their drums up in different places. Then each one of them have their own setup, so it's kind of
Right.
hard to leave a set of drums there. So we would change the snare. We might change the toms if they're in the wrong place. We change whatever the guy needed, but that's how we worked it out.
So
Wow.
thanks to looking at Andrew Doe's Bellagio website, June 3rd, 1972, Crystal Palace Bowl in London with Elton John, Joe Cocker, Melanie, Richie Havens, and Sha Na Na. And that was
Richie,
recorded. Go ahead.
incredible.
Yeah. And then it was telecast on NBC as Good Vibrations from London. And the Beach Boys had 4 songs on it, and Elton John was a guest on the encore. That's what it
Yeah,
said.
what happened is, if you can picture this, it's like the Hollywood Bowl. If you can get a picture of that with a big pond and then a big lawn with all the people out there, and then there's a road on this side that comes all the way up to backstage coming in, and we're like in the our first or second song, saying we're always the last group on. And we see this huge Rolls Royce driving up the road. Everybody's looking at it, and the guy gets out and he runs on the stage, and it's Elton John.
Oh my gosh.
But the other thing that happened is the Who. What's the drummer's name of the Who?
Keith Moon.
Keith Moon.
Okay, Keith Moon. Just before that happened, Keith Moon came over in a helicopter and jumped out of the helicopter into the pond, swam.
Oh my God.
Paper, but
Keith Moon was a major Beach Boys and Jan and Dean fan.
Yeah,
he said that his dream was to be Dennis.
Mm.
He wanted to show his appreciation for the group, so he did something big. And so.
I think it was the Who's live album. They actually recorded Bucket T and Barbara Ann on as a part of their set.
Yeah, we recorded that whole show, but the recording didn't come out good because it's like a shell of Hollywood Bowl. Every mic is hearing everything. You were talking about doing Carnegie Hall after that. We were trying to make up for the Woodstock thing by doing this live recording at the Crystal Palace, and all of these guys coming in, and the recording was so bad we couldn't use it. So we went and did the Hollywood Bowl to try to do something that's above the normal.
Oh, you mean Carnegie Hall?
Carnegie Hall, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you've been a part of a major part of their history, John. I mean, the era that you're talking about that you worked with them was not the 90s or the later years. Who was Jason Rafilian?
Did you know, John, were you gone by that time, or did you know Jason?
Jason came in with Steve Moffat.
Okay.
I did the sound for the Beach Boys and I was leaving up until what I did is I got to the point where I wanted to kind of branch out myself, and I started promoting my own concerts. I did like Linda Ronstadt and Jackson Browne and Fleetwood Mac and shows like that at different venues, trying to see where I wanted to fit in the music business. And what I really liked was recording. So I ended up, the record companies told me that every night they get calls from their artists that play Vegas, and they have to fly them into LA to record and fly them back that night or in the morning. And they said, if you open a studio there, we'll support it. And they did. I opened the studio there. I ran into Carl when I was looking for equipment down in LA, and he had $1 million worth of a whole studio all in one package. Everything I needed, more than I needed, all in one package. And he gave me that stuff, and I took it back and opened the studio. And I was 24 hours from day one.
Wow. John, was Carl?
Oh, wait, you were talking about Jason Rathalian.
Yeah. I remember talking to him a few times. That
Jason
was the name.
became backstage equipment, and actually he's the one that built the little wave thing that they have
Uh-huh.
on stage in front of their amps now.
Okay.
And he liked metalwork, and so he built that for him. But he became their equipment guy.
Okay.
Hmm.
Wow. Interesting. So
Dave, what
I
are you
have
gonna
a
ask?
question for you about Carl. We hear all these things. I read all these things, and just I've met people who knew him. Was he as great as he? I mean, he just seems like there was nothing not nice about the guy. Just a wonderful, wonderful person.
But I mean, he is. I have never seen Carl get mad, and I only saw him cry one time. But he is so even keeled. Disasters can happen, like the recording. He got upset with that, like that recording didn't work, and that was huge to him. But he's very even keel. He's the nicest guy in the world. He's very laid back. He basically managed the Beach Boys.
Yeah, that's the feeling I always got.
Well, unlike other groups, most groups have a manager that they're paying 10 or 20% to, and they have an agency that they're paying another 10% to. And the Beach Boys, they helped build the entertainment business. They made changes to the industry, and they kind of were ahead of the industry. They were ahead of the industry in business, and they were ahead of it in music, in my opinion. That's
Wow.
why, some of their more mellower albums and things didn't sell well after I left. I mean, they had a long period up until Kokomo and that stuff that went double platinum, I think, but they didn't have any gold records between that time and like 89, between 66 and 89, I think. But so where was I going with that?
No, I just asked you if Carl, what a nice guy Carl was.
Yeah, what happened with Carl is, I'll go back to Brian saying home all the time, and that was part of what I was talking about there. And we would be on the road. We would be on the road actually to make money and to promote our albums. That's at first. That's what tour for. You got supported by the record company to go on tour to promote your record. And every time sales started happening in one city, they wanted to go over there and play, and the sales took off more. It was more, but then it grew into where you could make a lot of money touring. And we always had the thought, the Beach Boys loved what they did. I think the Beatles did too, but we made a decision that we want to do this for the rest of our lives. And so we want to draw a map out to do that. So we might have been different than other groups during the psychedelic time, but we were still going in the direction that we knew would be sustainable. And music that would last forever. I would do that with the Beach Boys. We'd be on tour, and all of a sudden things would be start slowing down, not as many people at the show. And all of a sudden, there's 10 years old and 15-year-old people again. All of a sudden, they heard the Beach Boy music, and they're, now it's filling up again. We did that probably 4 times when I was with them, and the ups and downs of their career.
You were there during the Endless Summer explosion when when Endless Summer came out, and then they started playing stadiums.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
Chicago, yeah.
Well, and after that, the price, we always kept the price down. We encouraged other groups to keep the price down, but it got ridiculous. I mean, now what are you paying? $300, $400, $1,000 for a ticket? The gross potential of those shows, you worked in a theater or a stadium, you know what that means. It's huge.
Yeah.
I think did $2 billion on her last tour.
Wow.
And that's just because of ticket prices. But again, back to Carl. Brian is at home working on the music. Carl, every night after the show, I would go back to the hotel after the guys did or with them and then hang out. Carl was on the phone with Brian every single night, and they reviewed what music was going on. They listened to the stuff on the, so he was very involved in mapping out the music and letting everybody else know
Really?
what was going on. But it also, you know, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but Brian wasn't the kind of guy that wanted to go into meetings and vote. And Dennis, who was my best friend, didn't either. Dennis and I were usually off doing something, you know, hunting or racing cars or boating or surfing or whatever. You know, we were just that kind of people. So Carl got to the point, in other words, Carl, if you're in a meeting and there's 5 guys and you're going to have a vote, Carl had 3 votes.
Okay.
He voted for himself, Brian, and Dennis, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so, and you know, really, Al Jardine did not want to manage the group. Mike Love certainly didn't. Mike was really into meditation and just went off and did that, and it's really benefited Mike. He's good because of that today. But Carlo was, again, wanting to sustain this business forever. We always held that. I always talked to Carl about that. We made decisions based on that. And so he, you know, Nick Grillo was our business manager, but he was an accountant. We got him from our accounting office from Lefkowitz, an accounting firm. And he was not basically a music business manager. He was an accountant.
Yeah.
And so we ran, you know, we learned the business because we got in it really young. And so we knew it. We knew when you do an album, you give it to the record company and they come back and they say, we don't hear a single. Well, that's the marketing department. Your album, you know, Mo Austin, the president of the company, listens to it. He's got Van Dyke Parks there. He listens to it. And good decisions get made. He's got A&R guys that are listening to it. But it's the marketing department. If they're not behind your record isn't going to go anywhere. And and a lot of the Beach Boys' downtime was because those marketing departments, you know, if they're listening to psychedelic music and you bring in Little Birds, they're going, huh? Because the reality to them. But if they would have gotten behind the music, because although it didn't jump on the charts, you know, to number 1, it jumped in at you know, 50 or 100 or whatever, but it sustained. People learned to love those songs.
Yeah.
And so time we had sales over time, but we weren't popping records like we used to.
Wow, that's true though. Yeah, those songs kind of like didn't pop into anything. Then all of a sudden, for instance, Little Bird is just a great song. You can still listen to it today and appreciate it.
The entire Friends album is amazing.
Look at Pet Sounds. I mean, the record company said we don't hear a single. Every song.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Wow. Well, and that's why they added, because they originally did not have Sloop John B on there, right? So they put Sloop John B.
Yeah, right.
Into the mix because they said we don't hear a single.
We'd give them a song that was a single. And Sloop John B was Al Jardine's thought to Brian.
Yeah.
He thought it to Brian and he thought we could do that. So.
And then from what I remember, Al telling me, and I'm sure he's talked about it in other interviews, that he actually brought the idea to Brian in '64, but it took that kind of length of time for it kind of to come and be on Brian's, you know, in front of Brian to, you know, to actually do it.
Well,
and
he did. I mean, I didn't see him do that, but I know that he did that. But also Al has a lot of private music things that are different than most other people's. And, you know, he's kind of a country guy. He has horses and likes a lot of land. we all lived in Beverly Hills and Bel Air, and he lived way down Sunset Boulevard in the middle of the woods.
Yeah, that's the impression I got.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great guy, and he really has good ideas. He did that with other songs, and his trilogy on the Holland album is great.
Oh,
So
it's amazing. It's so good.
yeah,
Cotton Fields was a great example of
Yeah.
that.
yeah, that was a Carl didn't like that song. Carl was
No?
embarrassed that we did Cotton Fields, especially after we had Blondie and Ricky on our shows.
I never thought of it that way.
I never did either. That's
That's
interesting.
the truth, and Carl did. He was embarrassed at it. He was sorry that it was on there, but it turned out great.
It sure
I
did.
tell you, speaking of Blondie, I don't want to hold you guys up, but like my wife has really gotten a really great vibe from him because we've seen him the last couple times with Brian's solo tour, and he has got one of the most powerful voices that I've heard in a long time, and I've seen a lot of stuff, and really great instrumentalist and singer.
He looks like he's being like possessed when he goes out on Brian's show. Now, I never got to see him back in the 70s, so I don't know. But when he was with Brian and Al, when he came out and did Wild Honey and I guess Wild Honey and Sail and Sailor, he just looks like he's possessed, and it's cool in a really cool way. I mean, it's just like he's channeling the heavens through his body. It's wild.
Blondie's a different looking guy. He's got red curly hair. I mean, this is when I first met him. His eyes are like banjo eyes. You know, they're out like he's a white black guy with freckles.
Yeah.
but also, Blondie has one of the best rock and roll voices I've ever heard.
Oh man.
Great guitar player too. If you ever get a chance, I forget your name, your first name.
Dave. He's another Dave.
Oh, okay, good. Dave, if you really want, we brought the Flame over. The Flame were, I don't know if you know this, the Flame was #1 group in South Africa. We met them. We were just started Brother Records. We met them in England on a tour that we were on. The Bee Gees were trying to produce them at the time, and Carl talked to them, and I talked to them. And they decided to go with us, and we flew them into the United States, and they did an album called The Flame. And if you ever get a chance to buy that album, you'll love it. Your wife will love it. I mean, Blondie is just all over that, and the music is great. They sound like a new Beatle group is how I would have to say what the sound is.
I will do that. Yeah. I've heard parts of it. I heard the song See the Light, which sounds like a Beatles tune back then. But
And See the Light was actually a song they did prior to the deal they made with Brother Records. See the Light, I think, was from... No. I'm getting that wrong. I think See the Light is on that album, isn't it, John?
it's on that album, yeah.
I'm not sure names of the songs.
I think it is. There's another song they did prior to being discovered by the Bee Gees and the Beach Boys that sounds a lot like the Moody Blues, and I can't recall the title of it.
Four guys. There was Ricky and Blondie and Brother and Steve.
Steve, yeah.
Steve and Brother got scared of everything and went back to Africa. Steve got sick, and so we put Ricky and Blondie on our tour, and they kind of became one of the Beach Boys, which, to be honest with you, I think was a mistake. I think they were artists in their own right. And again, it's the problem with the record company. I mean, Nick Grillo took their album, The Flame, to record companies, but he's not the guy to go into a record company and promote it and get it.
Oh, okay.
Right, certainly not an accountant, right?
If you hear that album, and you'll know what I mean. That would have been a #1 album, a #1 group if they would have got released and marketed.
Very interesting.
To me, it's a shame. I mean, Ricky's still working with
Bonnie Raitt, right?
Bonnie Raitt, yeah. He lives in San Francisco. And Blondie, he still backs up the Stones and does stuff with Brian and the Beach Boys and all that, but he's still got a great voice.
Oh my God, unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I mean, I in Europe one time, Blondie and we didn't want to fly with everybody, so we jumped on a train for a couple of days and went to Holland or something. But we had a good time, and he's just an exciting guy, and he's a real musical guy. He's always doing something with music, singing or playing or something. He's like Dennis in that way. Dennis, every time I spent half of my life with Dennis. All the stuff that we did together, but no matter where we were, it doesn't. If you're in somebody's house or a store walking by or something, if you run by a piano, Dennis is going to go on the piano and start playing it. And he does some really neat honky tonk stuff, but he really loves Dennis. Dennis can fall in love with the girl in 5 minutes. Fall out of love with her the next day. But I mean, he does. He truly falls in love with her. And one of his most favorite songs was, what's the keyboards?
You Are So Beautiful.
Yeah, You Are So Beautiful. Who's the keyboard guy? What's it?
Billy Preston.
Yeah, Billy Preston wrote that song. But that was one of Dennis's favorite songs with girls. And he did it on stage a couple of times. One time he started doing it, and it was so quiet at the beginning that someone yelled, and then Dennis just got up and said, "I'm not doing
it." Now, John, do you know Billy? I know Billy Hinchy told me that he was in I think it was a bar one night. It was Billy Preston and Dennis was there, and that Dennis actually helped write that song, but was ultimately uncredited. Do you know anything about that?
I never heard that story. Huh?
Okay, that's just something Billy Hinchy had told me, that Billy was there and he saw the two of them working together, and that's part of the reason why Dennis loved performing that song, was because he had.
I mean, Billy, that's Carl's brother-in-law.
Right.
Wonderful. If Billy said it, it happens.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. If Billy was there and he said he saw it, and so I've always kind of taken his word on that. And the lyrics that strike me as very Dennis are the where he sings, "You're everything I hope for. You're everything I need."
Yeah.
That seems very Dennis. That's those words seem very Dennis to me.
Yeah, that whole song is where Dennis's head is. I'm happy to know that. That's a great song.
Yeah, that song seems like it was, and maybe it's just because we're Beach Boy fans, and it just seems like it was made for Dennis.
Yeah, it was. I mean, he always, no matter where he were, I like some of the fun stuff he would play, so he'd always do that, and he'd try to show me different parts on the piano and stuff, but it always got back down to "You Are So Beautiful" or something like that.
That's so cool.
Wow.
Well, Dave, is there anything else you'd like to ask John about?
Oh yeah, well, let me tell.
What was the I remember in a Beach Boys show we had, and I remember this very vividly because there was a big traffic situation in Pittsburgh, so the show had to get delayed a little bit, and I happened to be sitting in a room with Mike Love, and I asked him, I said, "So what was it like working with Brian on his genius level? What can you tell me something he's done that brought out the fact that he's a genius to you?" And he said to me, and I probably should not repeat this, but he said to me, "Well, he stays at home and gets 1/5 of all the money that we earn." He goes, "That's a genius to me," which I thought was kind of a. Well, my question to you is
very truthful and funny.
Yeah, well,
my question right now, we like the rights to the Beach Boy name.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's why Mike is able to tour under that name. So the whole family gets money every time.
Yeah. So his view of Brian's genius was he's home doing nothing and he's getting this money. But had you ever had an experience where you went, yeah, he is a genius? I mean, he's done something like the old Linda Ronstadt story where she talks about how he was recording with her, and then he went off he had to figure something out, and he went off onto the piano, started playing some honky tonk music, and in his head, the song he was figuring out was like completely different than that. But he went back and he knew what he
Well,
wanted to do.
I mean, part of it, you can look at the Wrecking Crew thing, and they'll even tell you they would come in, and they always loved Brian because Brian would call them at 10 o'clock at night when no one else in the world was going to call them. So they got to come in and at that time, I think a 3-hour session was $300 or $400
Okay.
and a double scale. So he got $800 for coming down for 20 minutes and doing a part. But the point is Brian would bring all of these guys in, and they would play little parts, the strings, the horn guys, the rhythm guys, everybody would play these little parts, and they would just be confused about, why am I here doing this little thing, this nothing thing? And then they all of a sudden would hear all of the music, and every single one of them, it would just blow their mind what they did. So anyway, I'm sitting in the studio, and all of this sound, this music is coming out, and Brian's doing his part. And on the third part, Carl tapped me on the shoulder and he said, just brighten the vocal just a little bit. So I just clicked it 2 dB. It takes 3 dB to take a volume change that you can hear. And I did 2 dB, and Brian came into the studio and he's listened to this triple overdub and all of this music. And he said it's sounding great, but Jon, don't move the EQ up when I'm doubling my voices.
Oh, wow.
He heard that. No one in the can hear that.
Wow. Okay, that's a good story to leave on.
And he did it with one ear.
Carl nudged me and started laughing. How unusual Brian was.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, Jon, this has been a real pleasure. I appreciate the time that you spent with me, and all of your experience that you've had over the course of time, and it's really been a really big honor. Thank you very much.
Pleasure to meet you. I'm glad to meet someone that's back in one of the theaters or shows that we did in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. We probably swore at each other in the box office or something. There was always it was a nightly contention in the box office, because we were always, back in them days, we had what we called the hard ticket, right? There was no ticket master. I mean, you had these tickets and you counted them, and you guys would, not just necessarily you, but someone like you would come in and go, how many seats are here? And really looks like there's more seats than you say there's here. And by the end of the night, it was the box office was kind of like, excuse the language, but it was like, no, fuck you too, and just back and forth.
But Dave, you know what we got into with that? Dick Dury and I came up with, we went into the box office, and there's when you order tickets, there's a ticket register that you've ordered a certain amount of tickets, and then you sold some. So Dick and I would come in, and we would physically count the tickets that are left.
There you go.
And that would tell us how many we sold.
Yeah. And
if we wanted to argue about that, we wanted to ask them what they did with those tickets.
Yeah. I'm glad I'm retired sometimes.
Oh, nowadays it's crazy. I mean, they have an accountant with a computer that comes in and does the box office.
Yeah. Yeah, settlements used to take a good 45 minutes, an hour sometimes. Now, from what I hear from, some of the younger guys that worked for me, it's like sometimes there is no settlement. It's already done on their software. So
it's all mapped out, right? There it is.
When we used to do rappers, they always had money in their socks and
yeah, right.
Anyway, well, thank you again very much.
Okay, well, it's a pleasure.
Thanks, Jon.
All right, we'll talk to you guys later.
Okay,
right.
bye now.
Bye-bye.
So, man, that was fantastic, Dave, because you
Yeah,
got the
it was.
opportunity to talk to some. Yeah, I had, I wasn't completely clear about all the different experience you had, and that was great because you guys had so much kind of in common from that
Yeah,
perspective.
yeah, for sure. It was nice talking to someone like that. Yeah, it was. So our
Uh,
session's coming to an end.
yep. Um, so yeah, so I just did want to show you that you did not say the word. The word was pine cone.
Uh-huh.
Pine cone.
Okay.
But don't despair. You're still going to get some goodies mailed to you for
Okay.
VIB collectible stuff. Now, I mean, I must imagine you have some nice things, like maybe even ticket stubs from way back in the day. Did you ever hang on to those?
Well, ticket stubs I don't have, but I have a lot of pictures somewhere. You know, we made a habit of always taking pictures with, there was a magazine, I don't know if it's still in existence, called Polestar
I
or
remember that.
Performance Magazine, even Billboard a little bit. We would take pictures with bands, send it to them, give the bands, like I remember the Beach Boys, we gave them like bags with our name and their name on it, sold out concert. And we would do these pictures to show people in the industry who we were and that we were, you know.
Mhm.
I have all that stuff somewhere, but I'm not giant on hanging pictures of me and you know. But my wife always says I should write a small book about this stuff, but I never find time. Or I have all the time in the world, but I make up excuses, you know.
I understand. Well, yeah. Well,
I
I've
appreciate.
enjoyed it. I hope you have too.
Yeah, well, this was great. Really worth it. It was just really, really worth it. Thank you very, very much. It was nice meeting you. And I know I have a friend in North Carolina, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yep, Charlotte.
If you're ever in Pittsburgh, I could take you to all the Steelers stores there are here, because we got tons of them.
I went to I was in I think Acme, Pennsylvania this last summer, and I went to a pizza place because we were about to arrive and stay at my wife's other cousin's or her aunt's house, and it was in Acme. I think it was in Acme, and I
Yeah,
think the place was called Alexander's Pizza.
I
And
don't know.
oh my Lord, I took photos while I was waiting for my sub sandwich to be made. The entire lining of the interior of the restaurant had Super Bowl tickets from '74, and the owner of the pizza place, he used to go to all the Steeler training camps and he'd take the photos of the guys and then he'd go back the following year and have them autograph them. I mean, I had not, I felt like I was sitting in a museum waiting for my food. I mean, it's just amazing. It's just absolutely amazing. But I will take you up on that.
Yeah,
The
for
next
sure.
time I come through, I would love to meet you, meet you face to face and go to some Steeler hangs.
There you go.
That'd be great.
Listen, I appreciate it. You have a good night.
All right, you too.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye now.
Bye bye.